Hey, Elle, how are you?
Good. Can you hear me?
I could definitely hear you. I can hear you and I can see you.
Perfect.
So how you been? How's everything going?
Good, good. Yeah. It's been fun. We've had a busy couple of months with the team.
Hmm.
It's like somebody from Glory is fighting like every weekend for like 2 months.
Well, it's funny because I feel like I'm like interviewing half your team this week. I had Jason on yesterday. I had Devin on yesterday,
Awesome.
Weber,
Yeah.
and he kind of mentioned the same thing. He's like, I asked him because I was looking up your team, and I saw that like half of the people that are training at your gym have a fight within like a month of each other or like weeks of each other. So I noticed that. Like I know Julian fought like I think a couple weeks ago. I know Kevin's got a fight coming up. I think this
This
weekend.
weekend. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of crazy. Like, is that kind of a thing at all different gyms, or is this just Glory MMA?
I think it depends. It depends like on the gym. I feel like a lot of the other big gyms don't necessarily have like the same amount of pro fighters that other big gyms do. So I think it just probably depends.
Hmm.
I haven't really trained at any other big gyms, so honestly, I couldn't really tell you. I've been at Glory for a while now.
Hmm. Well, that's all right. No, and I think it just kind of helps the fact that like if one person gets a fight, they try to get them all on the same card. It's just easier, I think, to help for the fight camps. First of all, I want to just thank you for coming on the podcast and letting me interviewing you. I know that you kind of had your hands tied for a bit, but I'm glad that we
No
kind of
worries.
worked out.
Yeah.
So let's jump right into it. So what kind of got you into MMA in the first place?
So I ended up in the fitness industry through
Hmm.
bodybuilding, actually. So I got really into bodybuilding, did a couple of shows, and then I actually went out to Las Vegas for um, the Olympia just to watch and go to They have an expo with the Olympia. It's really cool. There's all these booths and stuff going on in Vegas. It's a lot of fun, and
Hmm.
a lot of the higher level guys tend to be at a lot of the gyms around that week. So we were just kind of gym hopping, me and a few friends. And I ended up just hitting a bag at City Athletics out there in Vegas. And I
Hmm.
ran into Floyd Mayweather Sr.,
No
and
way.
I
That's
had no
awesome.
idea who it was. And he was super nice, held pads for me. And then I ended up chatting with him and his manager afterwards, and they talked me into coming out for a little bit. And so they took great care of me. I flew out, stayed with one of their female boxers for a week, and I got to train at the Mayweather Club. And it was such a cool experience, but he really kind of pushed me to pursue. I was originally going to pursue boxing when I got back to where I was living at the time in
Hmm.
Springfield, but there weren't really any boxing gyms. So I ended up at an MMA gym and realized I really enjoyed grappling a lot more. So
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that beats grappling and BJJ. So was it kind of like the jiu-jitsu that came in first, or how did you do everything all at once?
I mean, I was probably up there. I found an MMA gym that had a boxing coach, and I was
Oh,
probably
okay.
hitting pads with him for maybe a couple weeks before he talked me into staying for a jujitsu class.
Hmm.
And after that, I was like, oh yeah, this is for sure what I want to do.
Well, that's cool. That's cool. And before I get any further, I gotta ask, how did you come up with the whole thing with the nickname, the Ruthless?
That one was Grant. So I
Oh,
used to
okay.
have a really dumb nickname that I won't say,
No,
but
no, not gonna answer. Okay.
that somebody else made up. And
Hmm.
Grant was like, "Well, that sounds stupid, so don't use that." And it just kind of came from my fighting style. I tend to I pressure hard. I'll dirty up the fight. So he
Almost like a Robbie Lawler kind of style then.
yeah, he's one of my favorite fighters of all time.
Would that kind of play a little bit of influence as well? Like I know you said Grant's like, oh, you got to change the name.
I mean, we thought about it when it was like coming up, and I was like, well, that's probably Lawler's nickname, and it's like,
Yeah.
well, there's a lot of people out there that have the same nickname, so but
So it's kind of almost like, yeah, it's like, can I copy your homework? Just don't make it obvious.
right.
Yeah. 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 Um, yeah, no, I think he's one of those fighters that definitely has. like the nickname sticks, and if that's what sticks for you, that's good.
for sure.
Now, I guess let's, obviously, you've had like nine or, so many amateur fights, but what was the feeling of the process going into your first pro debut?
It honestly wasn't as different as I thought it was going to be. I mean, at Glory, it's a little bit different than anywhere else I've trained.
Hmm.
It's the first gym that has a full training schedule. So, like, even as an amateur, I mean, I was training on weekdays at 10 a.m. So it's not like I wasn't training to be a pro. I was training to throw knees to the head and throw elbows since probably my sixth amateur fight. So it really, my training overall didn't really change at all. My schedule stayed essentially the same. I've been training as a pro for a long time. Like, that's been my goal for a long time. So in my opinion, like in my mind, I was like, well, I'm going to find part-time jobs that allow me to train full time, because that's the end goal. The end goal isn't to, work a 9 to 5. The end goal is here at the gym. So I've been keeping that schedule for a while. It was pretty much, yeah, generally the same. When I got out of the cage, they handed me a check, so that was cool. That never
There you
happened
go.
before. But other than that, yeah, really same old schedule, same old thing.
Hmm. And I know with some fighters, they typically what happens is that they have amateur fights, and when they have these fights, obviously it's meant to more of a learning curve, and then your record's not going to shit if you're losing a bunch of fights. But what happens with some of them I've talked to, or people that I know locally, what happens is they get in their pro fight, and either they carry that same attitude and they're kicking ass in the amateurs, so they go in, they let their guard down, and they get, like a flying knee or something, or something happens where they get devastated and knockout or whatever. I think like some, either it's like they take it too lightly or they're too nervous,
Yeah.
because they know, like, if I lose, like, I'm 0-1.
It matters. Yeah, it
Mm-hmm,
matters
it
as a pro.
matters.
And I think a lot of that also has to do with who's taking care of you. Like,
Mm-hmm.
people, I hear this all the time. Like, there's fighters be, oh, you're not a real fighter if you don't take every fight in every weight class, whatever's offered to you. And I promise you, you'll never ever hear somebody with a good record say that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you have to be developed. The best guys in the world were still developed. Khabib was still developed. He
Mm-hmm.
wasn't fighting Conor McGregor for his pro debut. There's a reason why good management is so important. And it is like
100%.
you said, amateur is all about a learning curve. Like, we took every fight we could when I was an amateur, because it's hard to find fights for females. It's especially hard to find fights for atomweight females. So we were
Mm-hmm.
fighting in weight classes that I had no business being in. But as an amateur, it doesn't matter, because we're here to learn. Now it matters who I fight. It matters what's on my record, and it's important to be developed. So I listen to James and my manager Joe, and I do what they tell me to do. I'll fight who they tell me to fight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and that's what you pay your managers to do. um, Now I do want to go back to you fighting at Atomweight, but let's just talk about your first pro debut, or your pro debut. So on that card, you got to fight with like two or three of your teammates on the same card. What was that
Oh,
like?
more than that. So FAC is really cool. It's here locally for us, and
Mhm.
it's really awesome because a lot of us get to fight on that show together. I think I probably had maybe 8 or 9 teammates on that card with me.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Just the ones
Even on
I recognized. Yeah.
on the undercard as well. So it's so cool. I love fighting on FAC. Like, the locker room is such a great experience with everybody back there. It really feels like you have an army behind you.
Hmm.
I've had to fight, out of town as an amateur when we were just trying to find me fights. And it's like just Grant and James there with me. And I mean, that's still great. Like, they're the best coaches in the game. But there's something about having, 10 of your teammates back there with you, hyping you up and helping you warm up and get ready. It's a cool experience.
And let's talk about that event. So how does your coaches, and maybe I should be asking this question, but like, how did your coaches adjust to having so many of their fighters fighting? Like, who was cornering who?
So it's typically James and Grant corner almost everybody.
Wow.
So it's a long night for them. This last let's see, the last FAC James was here for. The FAC before that, he actually took it was another short notice fight for him. So he was gone. That was my pro debut. He was actually gone for it. And he's still, he's still managed all the way in Abu Dhabi to be messaging everybody, checking in on everybody, taking care of everybody. And Grant really handled that show mostly on his own. Jeff Molina actually was my second corner for that fight. He's one of my main training partners. He's done a lot of work with me on my striking. And he's got his UFC debut here coming up. So they, between Grant, Trey Ogden is another one of our coaches. He actually runs a new Glory location out in Overland Park, Kansas, but he helps corner some of the guys too, but it's pretty heavy on Grant and James for those events.
And that's another thing I want to talk about was your gym. So I do want to get to that after, but, let's talk about David Onama for a second.
Yeah.
I hope I'm saying his name right.
Yeah.
Hopefully, if I ever get an interview and he's like, "Hey, you got my fucking name wrong."
Yep, Onama. He's awesome, man. He's one of the coolest dudes.
Yeah. This guy, I'd never watched any of his fights, but I was just looking up your gym, like I said prior, and I looked up his record. And if you take his amateur and his pro, the guy's like 15-0 or 16-0, and I'm thinking, why the hell is this guy not getting into a bigger promotion? Like, what the hell?
Well, honestly, I know people haven't heard about FAC yet, but FAC is the best place to fight. Like,
oh, for sure. But I mean,
better than LFA,
not on a regional circuit.
Oh, for sure.
Obviously.
I think he'll get called for a Contender Series next year for sure. And
that's what I'm kind of thinking. He's 6-0. And I kind of question, like, when is that call going to come,
So Grant's talked on this too. Like, he was actually doing an interview yesterday, and he was talking about, like, Chase Hooper is a perfect example of this. Yeah. There's a lot of really young guys that get signed to the UFC too soon. And even though they're super talented, like Chase Hooper gets his ass whooped every fight. And sure, he's come back and been able to get the win, but like you spend a few years in the UFC. He's like, what, like 19, 20 years old? I don't know how old he is, but he's super young, and like he's just getting brain damage.
Oh my God, like he's so young that everyone thought that he was Ben Askren's son at one point.
He's so young, and I think that it's important. Like Grant wasn't. I think Grant was what, 12-1 when he got the call for the Contender Series. And I feel like that like these guys have fewer and fewer fights as the Contender Series is going on. And occasionally you'll get a phenom that's absolutely ready for that. But I feel like you gotta take the time. Like, you gotta be developed. And we've run into it with some female fighters as well too. Like ABC didn't have a whole lot of fights before she got into the UFC. And then she ended up with Murderer's Row while she was in the UFC. And I think it was a little premature for her, Yeah. Like, so it made her career harder than it had to be. And I think that's happened for other people as well. Sage Northcutt's a good example of that. Like, he was this bright, shiny new thing, and now he's getting his face broken in 14 places in one FC,
Oh my God.
His career is probably on the downside. So I think it's important for those guys to be developed. And David's super exciting. I've never seen him have a boring fight against anybody. And like, he's made for the Contender Series. Like, he's super fun to watch. But it's important that he's ready, because I think he's gonna, like, he's a for sure contract on that show just because he's so much fun to watch. So I know they want to make sure he's ready for that step.
Well, and I'm not sure how the Contender Series works. I think you have to kind of contact them. So hopefully, with the management and everything, hopefully they'll do the right thing. They'll say, hey, well, how about you get a couple more fights to see how you do? Because from what I've seen, I mean, on his record, I mean, he seems like he's up there, and he seems like he's in the right spot. It's just, and that's the thing. Like, that's the only thing I would have to say against UFC here is that, like, no offense to Grant and all the guys that are fighting in the UFC, is that they're very pushy with fighters. They're very, they'll see, like, I'm trying to think of, like, even Chase Hooper, they really pushed him And then, you kind of see what happened with him once he was fighting a really experienced fighter. Trying to think of his name. Bruce Leroy. I'm trying to think of his
Oh, Alex Caceres. Yeah.
Alex Caceres.
That's
Like you watch
super
what
exciting.
happened with him. Yeah. And you watch like how he just like he was still in the fight, but you can just tell experienced and unexperienced. And I think there's no rush, especially when you're 19, 20 years old. I was
Exactly.
still in
Yeah.
college at that time. So like I think that it's just important that they need to take care of their fighters at the same time. But of course, it's on the fighter's end too. You make the decision to fight or not to fight.
And that's why you have to have a good manager, because
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to be smart to be good at fighting. You really don't. But you have to have somebody else that's smart, that's taking care of you
Mm-hmm.
if you aren't, and that's why, like, genuinely, like, I don't do anything unless James and Grant and Joe decide that that's what I should do. And like David's managed by Iridium as well as a lot of our other guys, and they do a fantastic job, and they communicate really well with our coaches. Jason House takes really good care of all the guys, so I know that when they send him that way, he'll be ready. He'll do amazing, and he's a savage.
Mm-hmm. Now let's kind of talk about FAC for a second. So, obviously, you talk you're talking very highly with the organization. Now, that being said, when COVID kind of hit, were you kind of worried about the shows? Were you wondering if they're going to come back on? What was your thought process when that happened?
For sure there were some worries. I know that Joe and like Joe runs the show. I know that they're gonna, if the city will allow it, they're gonna put on shows. I know
Mm-hmm.
that as an organization, they're gonna push for events with fans as much as they could. Um, and we had a little bit of a setback last year. In 2020, they had to postpone a couple shows, push them to
Mm-hmm.
the end of the year, and then I believe my pro debut was their first. Was it their first one back? Might have been the second. But it was cool. Like, we were able to have fans. It's such a big arena that they were able to safely have fans, social distance everybody, and
Mm-hmm.
so it's been such a cool experience. It's such a well organized promotion, beautifully done. They take such good care of the fighters. I've fought on RFA and LFA and various local shows all over the country, and I've never had an experience even close to FAC.
And I think that's the difference. Like you can fight where it might be a considered bigger organization, but if you're fighting somewhere where they're taking care of you and they really they make you feel like you feel good fighting there, that's I think that's one of the main things.
For sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they're taking over as one of the prominent shows for Fight Pass. I
Mm-hmm.
think, I think it's a better run, better talent than your other big shows on Fight Pass
Mm-hmm.
for the
I
most
know,
part.
I agree. Yeah.
So they're really growing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now I do kind of want to move on here. So like kind of going back to with your pro debut, at what point, because I know we were kind of talking about when fighters are ready to take that leap. At what point did you know you were ready for your pro debut?
When Grant and James told me I was ready for my pro debut.
Right? They just called the shots. They're like,
Yeah.
"You're going in, girl."
Yeah. I was pushing for it. My last amateur fight, I actually was a loss. I took a very short notice fight in Florida against a girl that is significantly larger than I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I made some mistakes in that fight. I think it is a fight I could have won. However, I felt that I was ready, especially at 105. Like, I performed really well. I've won, I think, every fight I've had at 105. So I've been consistent in that weight class. And so I was pushing for it as well. I was asking, but they made the call, and they're like, yeah, you know what? We're having trouble finding another amateur fight. So let's just go pro. That way we can, like, it's way easier to convince somebody to come into town from, to travel into town when they're getting paid. Like, I actually gave a cut of my paycheck to my opponent just so I could have somebody to fight.
Wow. That's dedication. No, I had a question for you, and I was thinking about it when I was writing it down. So I guess, like, I hope you don't mind me asking, but your relationship with the Grant Dawson. So how do you separate that from training and fighting? Like, how do you balance the two?
I mean, well, obviously we don't train together. Neither of us are going to benefit a whole lot from that.
Right, right.
So we have our own groups of training partners. He does
Mhm,
corner me, which he absolutely hates.
mhm.
He would love for me to just replace him in my corner forever, but he still does it because I'm comfortable having him there. And
Mhm.
he's a phenomenal cornerman. But I mean, we keep pretty much the same schedule. We spend 90% of the day together, I would say.
Oh,
Like, we,
okay.
we have our own groups of friends, and occasionally, like, he'll need a guy's night and I'll need a girl's night, and we'll
Of
just kind of.
course.
But I mean, we do pretty well. I mean, it works. We understand each other, and I think that's super important. There's a difference between supporting somebody and understanding where they've been.
Hmm.
So, like, when he's cutting weight and he's just a butthead, I get it. When I'm cutting weight and I'm a butthead, he gets it. Like, he knows I'm not usually around for his weight cuts, but he's there for mine. And so he knows when I can get back in and when I'm, trying to puss out, and he knows when I need to be done. And so it's nice to have a partner that also understands the process that you go through every day.
Yeah, and that's I love watching those they're like documentaries, or they're like I'm trying to think. They're like I know the UFC does them. They're like shit, I'm trying to
Oh,
think
like
what
the
they're called.
embedded.
Yeah, like the embedded, and I know there's some that have been couples or siblings, and like you can tell how close they are, and you can see when they're doing their weight cuts, and they're right there with them. And I like to see that because it's not just because a lot of the couples are normally both fighters, and it's nice to see that because they not only are they together as a couple, but they both are fighters. They both understand what it's like, so they're not going in like, oh, you got to cut 20 pounds. Oh, no, like you guys both know, like, you know what's going on, you know what it's like. So it's good to kind of see stuff like that at the same time.
Yeah. Like, we know when the other one needs to be left alone. We know.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
it's nice too, because I've dated guys that are like, oh, why do you have to train again? And he's dated girls who do the same thing. And it's like, well, we're both at the gym all day anyway. So neither of us are complaining about being at the gym all day.
Well, I don't know if I would do if I had a partner that'd be nagging on me about training, because I for my girlfriend, she's great. Like, she's never like, oh, like she's not like one to be like, oh, well, you got to go to the gym again. I'm like, yeah, I got to go. Like, I don't get to
Of
just
course.
choose whenever I want. So, um, but Glory MMA, I talked with a couple of your teammates yesterday, and they talked very highly about the gym, obviously, and they talked about how close knit the group really is, and such a hard working, dedicated group of individuals together.
Yeah, it's such a great group. Like, we really are a big
Hmm.
family. Everybody helps each other. Like I was talking about Jeff before. Like, Jeff has literally held count like pads for me on countless occasions. Like, I'm sure
Hmm.
he has put in hours of his time to help me, and he is the primary reason why my striking doesn't absolutely suck. And other guys have done the same. Mike Breeden, he fought on the Contender Series not too long ago. Like, he's helped me out before. Weber has helped me a ton with, like, my cage work and my wrestling. Witt's helped me out before. All this, like, everybody, Kroom helps me out all the time. It's
Hmm.
such a great group of people that genuinely want to see their team progress too. And it's like a lot of big gyms, you see like separate teams. It's like, okay, well, I come in with my guys and I train at this time, and I do this, and then so and so does this with these guys, and there's not really that team dynamic. And I think that's something that makes Glory really special.
Yeah, 100%. And I think every gym has a kind of a rapport within the group, I think. Now let's kind of just talk a little bit about I remember mentioning that we were going to come back to this, but fighting at Atomweight, I don't normally hear too many female fighters fight at Atomweight. You're probably the first that I'm interviewing that has fought at Atomweight. So is that kind of a weight that you want to fight at throughout your career, or is there opportunities to go up to light or excuse me, strawweight, I think would be the next one.
It's not so much the weight that I want to fight at, it's the weight that I need to fight at. Like
Okay.
I'm just not big enough to compete well at strawweight at the
Hmm.
high level. Like I'm
Right.
sure I could win fights on FAC and maybe an Invicta and strawweight, but the goal is the UFC, be world champ, whatever that means. If in 5, 6 years we still don't see Atomweight in the UFC, I'll go collect belts from ONE FC and Bellator and wherever else is available,
Hmm.
and I do think that the UFC will add atom weight at some point. However, I don't think that I can beat Weili Zhang at any point in my career because she has like 30 pounds on me,
She
like
is fucking big for strawweight.
yeah, and most of them are at that level. Jessica Andrade was huge when she fought at
Oh my
strawweight.
god.
Claudia is way bigger than I am.
Hmm.
Yolana's way bigger than I am. They're big girls, and I fought at strawweight before as an amateur, and I fought girls that were literally just me, but 20 pounds heavier than I am, and it really does make a
100%.
difference competing in that way. So I'm hopeful. I think we'll see atom weight in the UFC. I think I think they have a lot more options. I know featherweight, like they didn't end up with as many females as they hoped they would. But I don't see that happening with atom weight. You have Invicta has a number
Oh
of
my god,
high
yeah.
level atom weights. You
Hmm.
have ONE FC who has a number of high level atom weights that could probably whoop all the other atom weights butts. Um, there are some phenomenal girls fighting in Asia right now for my weight class. You have a lot of UFC strawweights that belong at atom weight that would love to go down.
Well,
So
and I know I'm trying to think of one fighter that came right to my mind when you were talking about that. I think Michelle Watterson. She's quite small.
she used to be the atom weight champ for
Yeah,
Invicta.
yeah.
And I'm trying to think, Carla Esparza, I believe,
Yeah,
also.
and she's quite small too. Yeah.
Keisha Torres is really small for
Hmm.
strawweight. Um, Honestly, I think even Rose could probably make 105.
I
There's a
think
lot of
so
those
too.
girls that could.
Yeah, and I think with those girls, I mean, they're still very successful. But you could see the level. Like when Jessica Andrade fought Rose the second time, you can see the weight difference for sure. Like the way Andrade was just hitting her, like I was actually surprised she was able to take those punches. I think she broke her nose in that fight. But yeah, like I think that's the issue that the UFC is having with those girls in that weight class. Like I find the straw weights are really they're having a hard time with the girls making weight at that weight class. And
Yeah.
I think Adam weight would be the right thing. It would be good for a girl. Yeah, again, for girls like Carla Esparza, some of those girls that are much smaller that actually have to go up weight. And I think as much as they say, "Oh, weight doesn't really matter," but it really does.
It really does.
It really does. I wouldn't want to be getting punched by a guy that's got 30 pounds on me. No, thank you. Which I have, and it's not great. So yeah, I think that's the right move. Do you talking about fighters missing weight? What's your thoughts on your opponent missing weight? Do you think there should be harsher penalties?
I I mean, I feel like 30% of your purse, like, and a lot of people close to me have missed weight before. I understand
Hmm.
the process. I understand the struggle. Um, it happens. Um, Obviously, if you're coming in, there was a fighter on the last UFC card that came in 11 pounds over. Like
11 pounds. Yeah,
he would
yeah.
have missed if it was at a weight class above where he was supposed to be fighting. He
Hmm.
wouldn't have been eligible to fight. Like if you clearly aren't trying at that point. Like you clearly like that's disrespectful. And I think that
Hmm.
they probably need to go on a case by case basis because it does happen. If you're missing weight multiple times, you need to go up a weight class, obviously.
Hmm.
Like that should be encouraged. Like Grant struggled with a weight cut at featherweight and now he's at lightweight. And it's just his body's just changed. Like he's bigger, he has more muscle tissue, like he's growing into his man body. You know, he's only 26 years old, or sorry, 27 now. He's only 27, so he's still building muscle and growing, and so it stuff changes. It gets harder. As you get older, weight cuts get harder. So I have mixed feelings about it. I think 30% of your purse is a pretty big pretty big price to pay already.
Yeah, I know Israel and Sonya, he said, oh no, take like 90%. It's like, dude, well, that's nice that you're making weight, but you don't really know you don't know how someone's body is. You don't know if people are sick, or you don't know what's going on. It shouldn't happen, but it does. So
I think it should go up each time you miss, is my kind of thought process. I think if it's your first time, like, yeah, we don't need to take 90% of your money.
Right.
But if you're missing weight multiple times, you should just get cut. If you've missed weight more than 4, if you've missed like 4 or 5 times, like, you should just be done. This is not like, there was actually used to be one of my favorite fighters too. He missed at flyweight multiple times and then went up to bantamweight and then still missed, and it's you can't do that. Like, no matter what's going on in your life, like, you have to be able to, you have to be able to perform. You have to be able to do your job. Like, if you don't feel good, or if you have a bad day, you still have to go to work. If you do anything else, like, you still have to go to work. And I've had, you all have weight cuts where you feel crappy or you're sick, or women like are on their period. Like, there's a lot of factors, but that's
100%.
That's not an excuse,
Yeah, and that's just it. And like, I mean, I'll never forget Johnny Hendricks. I think he missed weight so many times at welterweight, and then he moved up to middleweight, and he still missed weight. And people are thinking, like, what the fuck? Like, come on, man! Like,
at that point, like, you're just not doing the work.
You're not doing your job, no.
And at that point in your career too, like, you're a professional athlete. Like, you need to have a nutritionist that understands what they're doing, that knows how to help you, especially 100%. If you're struggling that badly. Like, you're done doing it on your own at that point. You need somebody.
Yeah, of course. Now, I do want to move on here. So obviously you have some teammates that are on the big card next weekend. I want your predictions on a couple of those matchups. So you got the main event, Jan Blachowicz and Israel Adesanya. Who you got in that fight?
I still think Israel takes it. I don't think anybody's going to beat him for a while, short of maybe a John Jones matchup. I just can't see anybody beating him right now. He's on another level.
What about that Polish power, though? I mean,
I still don't really know anything. I feel like we still don't know anything about Blachowicz, because Dominic Reyes looked terrible in that fight. And you could argue, like, well, Jan made him look terrible. I don't know. I can't tell if he just had the worst night he's ever had, or if Jan just made him crumble, because Dominic Reyes arguably beat John Jones. Like,
he did.
He won that fight.
Me, and everybody knew that he won.
I thought he won. And so, like, I don't think that was the same Dominic Reyes.
No.
And other than that, like Jan has some good wins. Like, he knocked out Luke Rockhold, but
which everyone won that night.
For sure. I'm not really impressed with Luke Rockhold anymore. He's clearly not training hard. Like, I don't know if that's that big of a win, And so I just don't know. I feel like he's not ready for Izzy. No. But anything can happen. I see Paulo Costa has supreme power. And 100%. Look what happened in that fight. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Izzy's so good at slowing down the fight. So good at finding his range. And it's just, he's such a hard guy to, like, he's even hard to pressure. The only person that's really been able to pressure him is Kelvin Gastelum.
And that was weird.
In the world at that.
And that's weird. The fact that if you look at Israel's his last 3 or 4 opponents after Gastelum, I'm not taking anything away from Gastelum. He's up there with all those guys. But if you look at, I mean, with him and Romero, obviously wasn't the most popular matchup. But I mean, you look at Romero, he never got really touched by Romero, never really got touched by, he was a champ. Whitaker,
Oh yeah.
And then Paulo Costa, I was like squinching my eyes. I was like, oh, here we go. Like I was just waiting to see him get like clocked and get knocked out.
And I think part of that too is the way Paulo Costa fought him. But I, at first I was like, oh, Paulo Costa looks terrible. Like, come on, this isn't the fight we were expecting. But I think Izzy does that to people. And I think he's changed a lot. I think he changed the way he fights too, based on the Gastelum fight. Because, like, look at Robbie. We were talking about Robbie Lawler earlier. Robbie Lawler and Rory McDonald were never the same again after Robbie versus Rory too, right? Like never the same again. You don't go through wars like that and then come out and be like, yeah, let's do that again. Like he's done a much better job in his last few of really picking his shots, staying at range, and not allowing himself to get smothered. And I will say I love Kelvin Gastelum. I think he's one of the best. And he is really good at blending his wrestling with his striking, and he's super good. He has super good pressure. But I also think that Israel has changed a lot of things based on that fight too.
No, and I agree. And I think every fighter goes through like an opponent that kind of changes you for either the better or the worse. Usually the better. You get that one opponent, whether you lose or you win, but it's one of those holy shit fights where he's like, okay, like I need to, this was a kind of like a wake up call for me. Like this is what I need to do in each fight. I can't be fighting this way every fight.
Yeah.
Now I do want to go on the next one here. Obviously, teammate got a big fight against Nunes. You got Nunes and Andersen. So, I mean, how do you see that fight playing out?
I think so. Megan is big. Like, I don't think people realize how big Megan is. Like, she is super freaking tall, and she does have really great range striking. I think the best way for her to approach the fight and her keys to victory is if she can stick and move and keep her range. That's what she needs to do to win. Obviously, like try and disengage from the grappling with Nunes. But Megan's big and she's got great takedown defense. So
it's going to be interesting for sure. And the reason why a lot of people are going to count Megan out is because, I mean, you look at Nunes, of course, she's going to be more the favorite. I mean, from her last 8 wins, I mean, you look at her and you think, how can any girl stop her? I mean, can a guy stop her? I mean, like, look how she hits girls and they freeze, like almost like, shit, did I just get hit? The only girl I've ever seen take a shit kicking from her was, I think it was her last fight, that Felicia Spencer girl.
yeah,
and I've never seen anybody take a beating like that. Like
Jermaine did really well with her too. I think she Jermaine Duran to me probably did the best with her.
She did the best,
but that also wasn't at 45, was it? I think that was
that was at 35.
Was 35, so
yeah,
different, yeah. But yeah, that's definitely what Megan needs to do.
Yeah, and I think Megan, I can kind of see how this fight where she's going to use a lot of her reach, and as she picks her apart, I think she might try to use some of those knees as well, as because she's so tall, and I mean, it'll be really interesting how she's going to be able to deal with the takedowns. But I think Nunes too, like I think what could happen is she's gonna get Nunes really frustrated, and Nunes is just gonna start firing wild. I think she's gonna use a lot of her straight punches. I think a lot of those straight, and because I typically I watch Nunes how she fights, and she does a lot of overhands, a lot.
Yeah.
And the reason, and I don't know if that's the best approach because you're throwing a lot of your overhands, and she'll be able to come through in the middle. So I think with Megan is, I could see a total upset. I really do. Or she could pull out that unanimous decision. But the issue I see with that is you watch how the UFC and how a lot of you watch how champions get beat, no doubt, and they still win. It drives me nuts.
And I think these are in very close fights. Like, yes, did I think Dominic Reyes won? Yes. However, can I argue that John Jones won 3 rounds? Also, yes. I thought Max beat Volkanovski last time. That's the only one where I'm like, damn, like.
Oh yeah, he won the second fight.
But like Cejudo decisioned over Demetrius Johnson after he lost to him, you know, so it does happen.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's where we see that happen tends to be in really close fights. And I've also it's interesting. James was there that night in Texas, the night everybody's super upset about the judging, and he said that he thought Jones won from that night, I believe, just from watching it live. So it looks different live as well than it does on our TV screen, you know, because we just see like this tiny little box moving, you know. So it's like, oh, it looks like he's pressuring him, but maybe he didn't move him as far across the cage as like we saw, you know. So it's I get that, but I don't know. I think it just depends. I think it's definitely true for John Jones. I don't know that that's true for all champions, but I feel like he's kind of reached that level of immunity where, like, he's literally hit a pregnant woman with his car and driven away, and nobody cares. Like,
I mean, the only thing that's really beaten John Jones is USADA. So,
right? And they lost too. The UFC was like, okay, cool, we'll just move the show to California, and then Vegas lost a bunch of money. So,
yeah, and that's where you kind of have to draw the line where.
Yeah.
You know, like it sucks because you see other fighters who aren't at the same level or they're not in the same type of rankings or star power, and they do something not as bad and they get kicked out of the UFC forever. Where he's got John Jones, who's done all these things, but at the same time, a lot of these things that he's done have been outside the cage that has nothing to do with UFC. So I can kind of see the reasoning there.
He's at the end of the day, the UFC is a business.
And that's what it is, right? It's all money.
They got to run it like a business. Like I'm never going to expect people to run their business poorly just because I don't like somebody, you know?
Mm-hmm. Now, lastly, I do want to touch upon, I just want to kind of wrap up here. So what are we going to see from Elle in 2021? What does 2021 have in store for you?
So I actually do have a fight booked. It hasn't been announced yet, but I have a fight here coming up in a few months. Okay. Super excited about that. So ready to get back in there. I would love to fight two more times this year. If that's too much to ask from the atomweight gods. I usually go get to fight like once a year is the way it looks right now. Mm-hmm. Just because there's not a lot of girls out there, but I'd love to fight twice this year. 3 times if we can find the people. I think I'm just trying to rack up the wins. We've talked with a couple major, bigger promotions. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if they've had trouble finding opponents as well. So it's just a weird time. So we'll take whatever fights we can get and move forward.
Well, that sounds very exciting. I'm excited to hear who the opponent's going to be, and good luck with your next upcoming fight. And thank you again for taking your time to come on the podcast here. I really appreciate you. I know you had your hands tied for a little bit, but I appreciate you coming on doing the interview.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it, Luke.
Thank you very much, and take care.